me share my screen. So inequalities. What is an inequality? From what you remember.
Para po siyang yung equality po is parang comparison po sa parehas, sa dalawang numbers po, or values or expression.
Right? So compared to linear equations where both sides of your equation, the left-hand side and the right-hand side, are equal to each other, for inequalities, as you said, right? They are unequal and there is a comparison. So we have greater than, less than, and sometimes not equal sign, right? We have uh, this, oops, there. We have this symbols, but mostly this. So we have greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. So definition of inequality, mathematical definition, is that it is a statement showing that two expressions are not equal. So yeah, basically what the name would suggest. So we have four properties for inequalities. So for any three terms that are real numbers, so for any values of A, B, and C that are real numbers, okay, we have first property is trichotomy. What this means, if A is not equal to B, then either A is greater than B or A is less than B. So this is the first property. Second property of inequality is transitive property. Transitive property of inequality states that if A is greater than B and B is greater than C, then A is greater than C. Similarly, if A is less than B and B is less than C, therefore A is less than C. Number three, third rule. So these are the basics, right? But of course, A, B, and C could refer to fuller equations such as xy squared, x plus b plus square root of c, for example. This whole equation could stand for an A, B, or C in our properties. So going back to properties, property three is addition, property of inequality. So this states that if A is greater than B, then A plus C is also greater than B plus C. Similarly, if A is less than B, and then A plus C is less than B plus C. So magagamit natin to lahat later once we start solving our inequalities. And then our last rule is the multiplication property of inequality. This states that if A is greater than B and C is greater than 0, right, provided that it is not 0, since any number multiplied by 0 is equal to 0, then A times C is greater than B times C. And then alternatively, if A is greater than B and C is less than 0, then A times C is less than B times C. Now you will notice here that we only have addition property and multiplication property, whereas subtraction and division. So they are just the reverse of your addition and multiplication properties. So wala na silang sarili na lang policy. So let's look at some specific examples of these properties. So let's say we have the equation x plus 2 is not equal to 5. Then x plus 2 is either greater than 5 or x plus 2 is less than 5. This is property 1 or trichotomy. Or for our second rule or third rule, addition property. So let's say we have 1/2 x is less than 3. If we multiply both sides, so this is your A, this is your B, this is your A, this is your B. If we multiply both sides by 2, then 2 times 1/2 x is less than 2 times 3, right? You see her 1/2 x and then 3. This is your A, this is your B, C is 3. And then you just, of course, have to simplify it. So this will cancel. You have x is less than 6. And then for another example for, this is property 4 pala, multiplication property. For addition property, we have, as an example, if x minus 1 is greater than 2, if we add 1 to both sides, then x minus 1 plus 1 is still greater than 2 plus 1. So x is greater than 3. Everything clear so far?
Right.
Let's move on to the second section. So we have linear inequalities in one variable. So we have two variables and three variables, right? So we have equation is greater than equal to equation 2. And then sometimes we would have equation 1 is less than x and is less than equation 2. So we have two types or classifications. So let's look at the first type first. So for linear inequalities in one variable, the main thing is that a times x plus b cannot be equal to 0. Kasi nga, if we go back to the first part of the discussion, if it is not equal to 0 or not equal to a number, then it's either greater than or equal to, right? Now, for graphing on a number line, let me draw a line. So let's say we have parenthesis symbol, negative infinity to 2. This is your interval form, right? The set form of this, you may need to review this also. So for the set form, x where, this is read as where x is a real number and x is less than 2. Because this is the range, right? The interval form refers to range. This is the minimum value and this is the maximum value. So if we write that in set form, x is a real number and is less than 2, right? So maximum 2 and then minimum value goes to infinite negative numbers. So if we graph this, since 2 is just the top number, less than 2, but not the last number on the inequality, we leave it as blank. So this would be 2. And then we just do negative infinity. Okay. So similarly, if let's say we have 2 minimum value. So if we write this in set form, we have x where x is a real number and x is greater than 2. So it will look like the opposite over here. So it will be 2 is our, well, not our minimum value. Our minimum value has to be greater than 2 and infinity, etc. Okay. If, for example, we have negative infinity 2, and then square bracket, this would be different because square bracket indicates that 2 is part of the inequality. So as a set, that would be rewritten as x, where x is a real number and x is greater than or equal to 2, meaning it is included. And if it is included, then we have to shade 2 to indicate its inclusion. Okay. Everything clear so far? So these are what we would call, so these two earlier, these are open intervals. This would be a half open interval, half open because merong maximum value on one end. And then the last type is the closed interval or closed inequality. Let's say we have 2 and 5. It is very specific. The two is the minimum value and 5 is the maximum value. So we write that as x, where x is a real number and x is greater than or equal to 2 and less than or equal to 5. Definite yung last points niya on your number line. So on the number line, we have 2, 3, 4, 5. We shade that and then we graph. Okay? Alright. Now let's proceed to some solving. These are just the basic parts so far, but yeah. So next section, we have what we call quadratic inequalities. So we discussed quadratic equations briefly last meeting. So let's say we have ax squared, right, quadratic form, ax squared plus bx plus c is not equal to 0. So yun yung kanyang marker. So either it is greater than 0, your full equation is greater than 0, or it is less than 0. So for example, we have ax plus b times cx plus d is greater than 0. So this is already in the factored form. So we have FOIL a, b, c, and d. So if we have this, when we are looking for the roots or zeros, right, of your equation, either ax plus b, if ax plus b is greater than 0, then cx plus d has to be less than 0. Alternatively, if ax plus b is less than 0, no, baliktad. Either they're both greater than 0 or they are both less than 0, which makes sense, right? To say you're either, the full equation is either greater than 0 and or less than 0. So if you're factoring them out, following the properties of multiplication, the two factors have to be either both greater than 0 or the two factors have to both be less than 0. Does that make sense?
Opo.
So this is true for greater than 0. Okay. But if your equation ax plus b, cx plus d, once you have factored out your quadratic inequality is less than 0, then they would alternate. Kasi less than 0 sa buo, diba? So for that to happen, your whole quadratic equation has to be negative in its entirety or in its some of its parts. So either one has to be negative, but not necessarily both. Kasi if pareho silang negative, such as here, diba? If pareho silang negative, magiging positive yung buong equation. Right? If pareho silang positive, magiging positive yung buong equation. But if the buong equation is negative, Then either factor 1 is greater than 0, factor 2 is less than 0. So factor 1 is positive, the other one's negative. Or factor 1 is negative, and then factor 2 is positive, right? Because basic multiplication rule, you have positive and positive makes positive, negative multiplied by negative makes negative, and then positive, negative, or combination of negative, positive makes a negative multiplication answer. Clear so far? So, kailan mo to gagamitin? Yung rules na ito or explanation nito. So, when you are looking for your roots, okay, yun, yeah, pretty much dun mo lang naman talaga siya magagamit. But also, lalabas din siya sa mga word problems, usually in your physics classes. So, beyond the review classes natin for your exams, magagamit mo to sa iyong mga physics problems like minimum maximum value, maximum height of the or of the trajectory, right? Mga ganon. Dito natin siya nagagamit. These are the foundational ideas behind our inequalities. Okay. Now let's try one problem. So let's say we have 3x squared plus 4x minus 7 is greater than 0. And we need to solve for its roots. So step one, once we are solving for its factors, we just need to factor the usual way, right? So this is 3x squared. So of course, its factors are 3 and 1. So by default, you will have 3x and 1x. And then we have to consider that our number, when multiplied, has to be negative 7. So that's just 7 and 1 since it is prime. But if added, it has to be positive 4. So the best thing you can do here is positive 7 and negative 3, right? Because positive 7 plus negative 3 makes positive 4. So what we do is 7 times 1. So ito, 7 times 1, positive. And then 1 times 3, negative, right? So you will have here 3x squared. You will have uh, negative 3x plus 7x, which is positive 4x. And then lastly, you have 7 times negative 1, which is negative 7. So we have 3x squared plus 4x minus 7. The siya 3x squared plus 4x minus 7. So as indicated by our quadratic inequality property so far, we have to equate both to 0, right? So we will write that down. We have 3x plus 7 is greater than 0, and x minus 1 is greater than 0. So let's simplify. 3x is greater than negative 7. Divide both sides by 3. You have x is greater than negative 7 over 3. So positive. Then same thing here, positive din siya, greater than 0. So x is greater than 1. These are our roots. Negative 7 over 3 or 1. Or in inequalities, this would be in your number line. And this is our interval, right? So we have negative 7 over 3. And then we have 1 yung inequality natin. Okay? May question ba? Or does everything make sense?
Okay po. Wala pong question.
Good, good. Now, let's do an example for discriminants. So here, same lang din siya for your equations, except you have greater than, less than when you are solving, right? So if you remember your formula for a discriminant, so we just use the capital letters for inequalities, and then for linear equalities, we use the small letters. But the formulas are the same. So discriminant, we have b squared minus 4ac. So let's say we have x squared minus 3x minus 10 is greater than 0. Let's identify its part. A is 1, B is negative 3, C is negative 10. So first we have b squared, so that is negative 3 squared minus 4 times A times C. Let's compute. We have 3 squared is 9. 4 times 1 is negative 4. And then multiply that by negative 10. You get positive 40. Final answer, 49 is our discriminant. So, ganun lang natin siya kukunin. Simple as that. Okay? Now, we also have, for inequalities, we also have what we call higher order polynomial inequalities. So what happens here is that you have multiple factors. You don't just have two of them. So let's say we have higher polynomial, right? Higher order meaning mas mataas sa squared yung exponents natin. So we have x squared minus 9 times x squared minus 5x minus 6 is greater than 0. So instead of expanding this and then factoring, it's good to notice that they are already kind of half factored. Okay, for example, this is a squared minus b squared. So if you remember, I think either last meeting or 2 meetings ago, I tasked you with looking up algebraic identities. Now, if you memorize this algebraic identities, mas madadalian kang mag-factor, right? If you recognize patterns. So here, it's easy to see na, this is a squared number, this is a squared number. And then, that's the algebraic identity. A squared minus b squared is equal to a plus b, a minus b. So makikita mo agad, okay, so ang factor nito is a plus b, which is x plus 3, and a minus b, which is x minus 3. Okay? Ito na lang i-factor mo, yung second half. Now, to factor this out, we need negative 6. So we can either use 6 and 1 or 2 and 3. But we need 5. So ang pinakamaganda dyan is we need a negative 6. So 6 and 1 para negative 6 saka positive 1. Okay? Pero pag in-add mo siya, negative 5 pa rin siya. So our factors for the second half of the equation is x minus 6 and x plus 1 is greater than 0. So this is the full factorization of our inequality. Okay? So, yun na siya pretty much actually. So, pag kinuha natin yung lahat, i-greater than 0 natin siya lahat. This would be x is greater than negative 3, x is greater than 3, x is greater than 6, x is greater than negative 1. I skipped some steps, pero clear naman up to here.
Up.
Okay. Now, bakit natin to kinukuha? So in linear equalities, we call this roots, right? For inequalities, these are referred to as critical numbers. So kapag tinanong sa exam, what are the critical numbers of this so and so inequality, this is what you do. You factor them out and then you solve them like solving curves. That is what we mean by solve for the critical numbers of the inequality. Okay? Now, the next type of inequality is called rational inequalities. After this part, I'm going to give you a few questions to solve. Okay, I'm going to give you a few practice questions. So for this one, let's say we have, okay, explain pala muna natin what are rational inequalities. So a rational inequality is basically fraction form siya, where your denominator, of course, cannot be equal to 0, right? So let's say, for example, if we have 3x minus 9 over x plus 2 is greater than equal to 0, where x is not equal to negative 2. Because if x was negative 2, magiging 0 yung denominator natin. And then mag-error na yung ating equation. Okay? Clear naman so far?
Opo.
So same thing here, we just factor it out and then we get the critical numbers. So in this equation, what are the critical numbers of the inequality? So for the top half, we just do method 1, which is GCF, divide both by 3. We get 3 times x minus 3. And then the bottom half is already simplified. Factored na siya, naka-prime na siya, is greater than or equal to 0. So we just have x minus 3 is greater than or equal to 0. And we have x plus 2 is greater than equal to 0. Now, mapapansin mo, where did the 3 go? Hindi na siya kasama sa pag-factor out. Yung nasa simplified factor lang yung gagamitan natin. Okay? So this would be x is greater than equal to 3, and then x is greater than equal to negative 2. So our critical numbers are positive 3 and negative 2. Everything clear?
Opo.
So I'll give you 2 questions for, okay, for the first one, solve for the discriminant, and for the second one, solve for the critical number. Let me just write them down. Solve for the discriminant. I'll just write it here and just to help you a little bit. So to solve for the discriminant, this is b squared minus 4ac. Our question is solve for d for x squared plus 3x plus 5 is less than 0. And then for the second question, we'll do a rational inequality. This one is a bit challenging. Solve for the critical numbers of x squared minus 1 times x squared minus 5x plus 6 over x squared minus x minus 2 is less than 0. Now, as a hint, if you have a repeating factor, hindi mo na siya kailangan ulitin. What I mean by that is, if just in case, in your factor, makuha mo, for example, is x is less than 1 2 times, Isang beses mo na lang siya bibilangin. Okay? I'll mute. I'm gonna grab some water first. Tapos, I'll let you solve. Okay, so we have 1 and 3. Now, if you remember from the previous example, we have to exclude 2, right? Because our factors for the denominator is x plus 1 and x minus 2. Now, if x is negative 1, edi the whole equation will be equal to 0, right? Because your factors of the denominator, x plus 1, cannot be 0, and x minus 2 cannot be equal to 0. Otherwise, it will nullify your denominator. So what this means, if we have to exclude x is less than negative 1, and we have to exclude x is less than 2. So ito na lang yung matitira na critical numbers.
Okay po.
But other than that, everything's great. So good. So let's move on.
Have you ever been driving and zoned out
Sorry?
and missed your exit? Or felt like
Clicked
you were
on my phone by accident. Okay. Now, our next section is absolute value inequalities. Yeah, and then I think we have time for discussing the Cartesian theorem. So for absolute value, you remember absolute value naman, where we have, so if k is a real number, so for absolute values, we have k has to be a real number, is refers to any possible equation, okay? Any algebraic equation possible. So absolute value of any equation less than k means that the value of the equation is either greater than negative k or less than positive k. Okay? So yeah, basically it's either uh, greater than k or less than k, but not equal to it. Kasi nga, that's a definition of an inequality. And then alternatively, if we have absolute value of an equation is greater than k, which is your provided value, this means that your equation is less than negative k, or the equation is greater than positive k. Okay? And then, of course, if k is 0, less than 0. If k is less than 0, then we have absolute value of equation is less than k, and absolute value of your equation is greater than. So to put this into practice, let us solve an equation. Solve for absolute value of 3x minus 8 is less than 1. So this is your equation. This is your k. Okay? Now, yung rule natin is that if it is less than k, if absolute value of an equation is less than k, our values are greater than negative k, but less than positive k. Let's go back to the equation. So we have, ang gagawin mo dito, kunin mo tong equation na to, and then isulat mo siya in this format. Okay? So how that will look like is negative k, so that's negative 1, is less than the equation inside your absolute value is less than positive k to positive 1. Malinaw so far?
Opo.
So, kailangan mo lang itong tandaan kasi dalawa yung rule niya depending on whether or not positive, greater than or less than yung absolute value equation mo to k. So let's continue. Let's solve. So we have negative 1 is less than 3x minus 8 less than 1. So of course, addition property. To simplify this, you have to simplify it on both sides, left-hand side and right-hand side at the same time. So in order to do this, first thing we need to do is cancel 8. in the middle equation. So we need to add 8. So if we add 8, we have to add 8 here also and add 8 here also. So we have negative 1 plus 8 is 7 is less than 3x, since this will cancel, is less than 9. Then next, we need to divide all sides by 3. So we will have 7 over 3 is less than x is less than 3. This is our final solution. Okay? If we write this in the SS form, interval form, set form, sorry. This is interval form. 7, 3, 3. And this is his set form. X where 7 over 3 is less than x is less than. Okay?
Paano nga po ulit naging 3 yun, yung 7 over 3? Paano po naging 3 yung...
Kasi this is 3x, right? So we need to cancel 3. In order to do that, we need to divide it by 3. So we divide left and right by 3 as well. Para ma-isolate yung x.
Yung sa 3,
Kung saan ito nanggaling?
hindi po yung ito po.
9 divided by 3.
Okay po.
So this is if your equation is less than k. So let's try one where it is greater than k. So we have 3 minus 1 half x. Absolute value is greater than equal to 7. Now, for this one, our rule, this call it rule, is that if your equation is greater than k or greater than equal to k, your equation is less than equal to negative k, and your equation is greater than equal to k. Let's go to solving. So again, we just need to express our whole equation to the formula, right? So we will have 3 minus 1 half x is greater than equal to k, and actually or 3 minus 1 half x is less than equal to negative 7. Kasi nga, ito sabi dito, has to be less than the negative 7. Yung gagawin. So we have to solve for this separately. So for this one, we have to isolate x. So in order to do that, first thing we need to do is tanggalin muna natin yung fraction para mas madali. So multiply everything by 2. You will get 6 minus x is greater than 14. Clear so far?
Opo.
So same thing here. Of course, pag minultiply mo to ng 2, since pareho lang naman sila, you will have 6 minus x is less than equal to negative 14. Multiplied by 2, negative 14. So back to solving it separately. So here we just need to subtract 6 from both sides. So we will get negative x is greater than equal to 8. Now here's the thing. If you have to multiply both sides by a negative number, the rule for inequalities is that you flip the sign. Anytime you multiply by both sides by a negative number, you have to flip the direction of the sign. So this will become x is less than equal to negative 8. Okay? Hindi pwedeng negative x na yung final, hindi pa to final answer. Has to be isolated 1x. And then going back to the other equation, so we have 6 minus x is less than equal to negative 14. So same thing, we need to add and not add. We need to subtract 6 from both sides, get negative x is less than equal to negative 20. Multiply both sides by negative 1. We get positive x, mag-flip yung sign, greater than equal to positive 20. So these are your two values. These are our two values. So our set form would be negative infinity. Ito, diba? X is less than equal to. So negative infinity to negative 8 maximum value. We use the square bracket because this is less than equal to. Or 20 minimum value to positive infinity. Now, we use or kasi absolute value siya eh. So it could go either way basically. So either positive or negative siya, right? Either positive k or negative k. So dalawa yung possible values when you have an inequality. Just the definition form. Okay? Everything good? No questions? Or do you have?
Okay po.
Okay, bigyan kita ng isang problem.
Pwede po isang example pa po.
So let's say we have, ano na bang nagawa natin? Less than, greater than. Okay, let's do a greater than. So if we have 3x minus 5 plus 8, so merong nakalabas sa absolute value now, greater than 0. What do you think should be your first step here? Kaya kita ng ganito. Meron kasi tayo ditong plus 8. What do you think should be the first step? Okay lang kahit walang hula.
Ano po the question?
What do you think should be our first step in solving this inequality?
Isa-subtract po muna.
Tama. You need to isolate the inequality or the absolute value first. So, subtract 8 from both sides. We have absolute value of 3x minus 5 is greater than negative 8. So, syempre, 0 minus 8. So, following this, if we go back to k, this is greater than. So, ang formula natin for that is that absolute value is greater than k. Then, equation is less than negative k, or equation is greater than positive. So, sundan lang natin. Copy lang natin ito. So, we have 3x minus 5 is less than positive 8, right? Since k is negative 8, negative k is positive 8. Tama? And then we have 3x minus 5 is greater than 8. So solve for it separately. We have here 3x is less than, add 5 to both sides, 13. Divide both sides by 3. You get x is less than 13 over 3. This is our first value. This one is not simplifiable anymore. And then for this side, add 5 to both sides. We get 3x is greater than negative 3. Divide both sides by 3. You get x is greater than negative 1. Any questions?
Okay, pwede po last na example po. Medyo nalilito lang po ako dun sa part ko dito.
Iyak ka ba o ano, may embarrass ka?
Posing. Isa-isahin mo lang naman siya. Ayan. I kind of do it fast. I think dun lang naman. Pero kanina nung nag-solve ko naman, tama naman lahat ng answer. I think kuha mo naman siya. Baka mabilis lang. Baka nabilisan ka. So, test na natin. Okay? Para matry mo na siya for yourself. Okay, sige. Bigyan kita ng sample problem. 3x minus 6 absolute value is greater than 0. And ay bigyan kita ng isang medyo challenging. X squared minus x is greater than 3x. I think you know how to do it. And isulat ko dito sa corner yung formulas natin. So, if equation is less than k, then your formula is negative k less than equation less than k. But if equation is greater than k, then equation is less than negative k or equation is greater than positive k. Okay? That's right. May tanong ako dito. This cannot be equal sign, ha? Since this is an inequality, so you have to be careful of your symbols. It's the final symbol for number one. Wait, never mind. Since this is zero pala, no? X is equal to 2. Ah.
Hindi po ako sure.
Okay, sige. Sorry, what did you say na? For part 2?
Ah,
Pakiulit, what you said? Pakiulit yung sinabi mo.
hindi po kasi ako sure dun sa pangalawa.
Yeah.
Tanong po ulit ako part.
Yeah. Actually, hindi natin ito na-discuss. I just wanted to challenge you para makita natin. So this one, to solve this one, we actually have to go back to one of our earliest discussions. I think session 2 pa yun. But kapag ganito, dahil pareho silang naka-absolute value, what you need to do is square both sides. So, yung property dito, mathematical property, is that the absolute value of a number or an equation is equal to the square root of the square of that number. Kasi diba, if you square a number, for example, 2, may absolute value of 2. If you square that number, 2 squared is equal to 4, right? And the square root of 4 is equal to 2. Babalik ka sa original number na 2. So, this is proving lang. And then, ito yung property. Okay? So, to restate the property, the absolute value of a number or equation is equal to the square root of the square of that equation. So, ang ibig sabihin natin dito is, para matanggal natin yung absolute value on both sides, since, this will not apply, diba? This will not apply here sa Latin K. You want to remove the absolute value on both sides. In order to do that, you get the square root of the square of the equation. Does this method make sense?
Opo.
So let's solve. So we get the square, let me change the color. Get the square root of the square. So copy lang natin, x squared minus x squared is greater than the square root of 3x squared. So of course, since para sila naka-square root, we can cancel that on both sides. We will be left with x squared minus x squared is greater than 3x squared. So far, what you will notice with these two equations that we have here is that when we are simplifying or solving some inequalities, they may inevitably lead to an equality, a linear equation. Okay? So continuing with number 2. So here, you need to square both sides of the inequality. And then, ilipat lang natin to dito. Okay, so we're just gonna transpose. Minus 3x squared on both sides. So it will cancel here. So we will have x squared minus x squared minus 3x squared is greater than 0. Up to here, nasundan ba? Yeah? Okay. So since pareho tong naka-square, this is again following the identity a squared minus b squared. This is your algebraic identity. When you have a squared minus b squared, the factor of that is a plus b times a minus b, where a is equal to x squared minus x, and b is equal to 3x. Nasusundan so far?
Opo.
So, gagawin lang natin itong change the color. Gawin lang natin tong part na to. We have our a, we have our b. Now we just need to write a plus b, a minus b to get our factors. So we have I'll continue it over here. So we have x squared minus x minus 3x, right? Plus pala. A minus b plus b, pero lang naman. And then x squared minus x plus 3x is greater than 0. And then simplify natin siya. This will become factoring lang. Okay? This is your A, B, C, D. We have I don't want to skip some steps. Simplify lang natin to. We have x squared minus 4x, right? Kasi minus x minus 3x times x squared. Then we have minus x plus 3x plus 2x is greater than 0. Everything clear so far?
Opo.
So next, let us, so this is simplification, and then let's do GCF. This is common factor. It's factor of x. So this will become x times x minus 4, right? And this becomes x times x plus 2 is greater than 0. Now, you may be asking, bakit walang plus or minus in between these two? This is because these are all multiplicands. So, naka-multiply na. So, same thing up to here. Multiply lang tayo. Walang madadagdag na plus or minus. Okay? And then, simplify ulit. Pagsamahin natin tong dalawang x na to. So, our final factors are x squared, x minus 4, and x plus 2. So, of course, this ang tatlong factors natin that x squared is equal to 0, x minus 4 is equal to 0, and x plus 2 is equal to 0, not equal to 0, greater than 0. And then, of course, for this one, this would just be positive, negative 0, right, for the first one. So that's null. And then we just have x is greater than 4, and x is greater than negative 2. So final answer, our critical numbers are 4 and negative 2. Nasundan lahat ng steps, tita.
Opo.
Let me share new screen. So tapos ka nang i-check yung science ability. Naka-share na ba yung Google
Opo.
Classroom? Okay. Let me stop it.